Okay, members, we'll call the meeting to order of the Select Committee on School Facilities on June 3rd, 2021. I'm Representative Tom Walters. I'll be the acting chairman for the next few moments. To get things started, reminder to everyone, put your cell phones on mute or turn them off. Make sure we get that done. In our new and virtual world, we do cut off public comment at 5 p.m. the night before. We have received no public comment, but if there was a technical error and you do wish to comment publicly via Zoom, please contact Karen Vaughn in the next hour or so that we can have you on the list. And Karen's email address is karen.vaughn, spelled V-A-U-G-H-N, Karen with a K, Vaughn, V-A-U-G-H-N, at wyoleg.gov. And again, Karen Vaughn at wyoleg.gov. So get an email to her in the next hour or so if you do intend to publicly comment via Zoom. So I think those are the housekeeping items we need to take care of this morning. Before we go any farther, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Mike Gilmore. Thank you for being here today, sir. We certainly appreciate seeing you in the audience, and always good to have you here. So thank you for that. And with that, I think the first thing we need to do is an adoption of the rules. Or excuse me, roll call. Yes, we probably ought to make sure we're all here. So roll call.
Thank you. Representative Banks.
Excused.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Harshman.
Here.
Representative Jennings. Representative Walters.
Here.
Senator Hutchings. Here. Senator Cost.
Here.
Senator Landon.
Here.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And committee members, as we're speaking today, please remember to use the microphones. You'll push the little button and the green light will turn bright green. When you're not speaking, turn it off. Because we are live streamed, we want to make sure that everyone can hear appropriately. So with that motion for the adoption of rules, Mr. Harshman, Representative Harshman, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt the standard rules of the legislature, which I think were last session's rules in this committee. I would second.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the rules that were used for this committee in 2020. And that's been seconded. Any discussion? Representative Jennings.
For the new members, could you just go over, just touch the high points of what the rules were for that?
Representative Jennings, I don't have them in front of me, but I would just say that the standard rules that every committee has been using for the last several years, there's nothing unique about this committee. That's the best answer I can pull them up here if you'd like.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think mostly what I was asking was, I think the main thing that they touch on is it a majority of the members or each house?
Thank
That's
you.
the main thing.
Majority of the members.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Okay, rules have been passed. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, if I might have privilege of the floor here for a
Please.
minute, before we get well into the meeting and on to the next step, I just wanted to tip my Stetson to the chairman who has served in this role for the past 4 years. And it is about time that we hand that gavel off and trade off. It's been a pleasure to be your vice chairman. And I just wanted to salute you, Representative Walters, for all the work you've done on this committee. Glad you're going to stay put and be there, but thanks for your leadership. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate it. And with that, I would take nominations for chairman and vice chairman. And I guess we'll start with just chairman. Do them independently. So nominations for chairman, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I would nominate Senator Pappas to serve as the chairman of the Select Committee on School Facilities.
I'll second.
Any other nominations? That one's been moved and seconded. Any other nominations? Seeing none, nominations will close. All those in favor of Senator Pappas as chairman signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Very good. Nominations for vice chairman,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator or Representative Harsh,
I agree.
excuse me.
I'm not that old, Mr. Chairman. See if everybody heard me.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr.
proceed.
Chairman. My apologies. I would nominate Representative Brown as vice chair.
Very good. Any other nominations? Representative Brown for vice chairman has been moved and seconded. Any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Perfect. Congratulations, Senator Pappas and Representative Brown, chairman and vice chairman. And with that, I'll turn the meeting over to the new chairman, Senator Pappas. Good luck.
All right. Well, thanks.
Behind you, but fight breaks out.
That's comforting news. Thank you. And I appreciate everything that the committee has done and the staff has done to bring me up to speed. As you all know, well, as you may or may not know, it's been 2 years since I've been on this committee. So I'm sure I'm going to be doing some catch-up work. And I'm glad to have the two previous chair and co-chairs as my wingmen as we go forward. So thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve in this capacity. So beginning today's work, our first item on the agenda, or third item on the agenda, historic revenue sources. We're going to get a briefing. Leanne Hogue will be doing that, and Leanne will be doing it from over there. So please, Leanne, the microphone is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Leanne Hogue, LSO. I'm going to be presenting on a memo titled Historic K-12 Capital Construction Revenue Sources. This memo serves as an overview of traditional revenue sources for school capital construction, as well as an overview of some of the changes that have been adopted by the legislature the past few years. So prior to the fiscal year 2019-2020 biennium, the school capital construction account received revenues from COLIS bonuses, state mineral royalties on school lands, and federal mineral royalties. The school capital construction account also has received transfers that have been approved by the legislature. Due to the substantial decline of COLIS bonuses, the legislature has modified these revenue sources over the past couple of years, and I will explain a couple of those changes now. The first change was to create the major maintenance sub-account within the strategic investments in projects account. In the 2018 budget session, the legislature created this account and directed 45% of the maximum earnings that could be directed to the strategic projects investments in projects account, or the SIPA, from the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund to the school major maintenance sub-account. In the 2019 general session, the legislature amended this to guarantee that 45%, or to guarantee the maximum earnings to the SIPA. This can be shown in attachment A, which should be page 4 of this memo, shows the spending policy of the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. And you can see that on that bottom box, the school major maintenance sub-account receives 45% of that SIPA. And for fiscal year 2021, that is an estimated of $43.7 million. Moving on to state mineral royalties. In the 2018 budget session, the legislature amended Wyoming Statute 94305B to distribute the full 1/3 of state mineral royalties received on leases for school lands to the school capital construction account. Previously, it was only up to $8 million, and then the excess was distributed to the common school account within the permanent land fund. In the 2019 general session, this was modified, and the distribution of state royalties was the 1/3 was now directed to the newly created school lands mineral royalties account rather than the state capital construction account. The legislature has also approved various transfers, and attachment B of this memo identifies these transfers in and out of the school capital construction account from fiscal year 2005, 2006, from that biennium to the fiscal year 2021-22 biennium. It's important to note that according to the April 2021 LSO long-term profile, it is estimated that the school capital construction account will have a $76 million revenue disconnect in the next biennium. I will also note that currently the state mineral royalties are on pace for this year for the with the January Craig revenue. But looking into the next biennium, there is a revenue disconnect. The school major maintenance sub-account, or the school lands mineral royalties account, it's important to note as well that there is not a permanent mechanism to transfer these funds into the school capital construction account. So historically, within the budget bill and 2020 budget session, there's a provision that allows the state auditor to transfer these amounts to the school capital construction account throughout this biennium. Table 1 on page 2.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leanne, just going back slightly with the school lands mineral royalties account,
Mhm.
which is the sub account that we created so we could watch it transfer as opposed to an automatic transfer to the school capital construction. If that money in that account is transferred to school capital construction, do we still have the $76 million disconnect? Yeah, how does it profile? That's kind of where I'm trying to understand.
Yes, so I was just getting to that. No, no worries. So table 1, it kind of shows the profile starting in the estimated fiscal year 2021 through 2025. And if you look at that state mineral royalties column, that is estimating that that is a transfer to the school capital construction account. So it is profiled that it would go to the school capital construction account.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I was mentioning, table 1 shows that historical and estimated K-12 capital construction revenues. And as mentioned, the state mineral royalties includes the state school capital construction account, a transfer to that. It's also important to note that the spending policy amount for the estimated years of fiscal year 2021 through 2025 show the maximum amount that could be deposited into the school capital construction account. That amount is guaranteed for fiscal years 2021 and 2022, but 2023 and beyond, it will be dependent on the investment earnings that flow to the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I do have one, and maybe Representative Walters could help me out. The money that's as we heard, there is no permanent transfer mechanism to the school capital construction account. And so it depends on appropriations doing that in the budget bill every year. Is there an effort to maybe make that permanent, or was that intentionally left that way?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a desire of the Senate to make sure that there was always a transfer so that it could be reviewed each year as opposed to an automatic transfer.
So it is intentional.
It is intentional.
Okay. All right, thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On that point, though, over the years, and I think it's still prudent for us to consider doing it, recommending actions from this select committee for what we think is an appropriate long-term policy, whether it ends up being adopted or not, to me is still appropriate. Coming up with certainly at a minimum, a way to fund ongoing major maintenance is essential. So I think we're obligated to try and come up with that approach and make it permanent, as well as we have swung and missed several times on updating what the major maintenance rate should be at. and having that recommended to the legislature, which realistically is, again, still a good idea for us to do, even if it's not adopted, because if we're not communicating what the appropriate major maintenance total rate is to maintain and optimize an efficient fleet of schools and school buildings throughout the state, we're probably not doing our job. Now, getting the rest of the legislature to listen to us, that's a different story, but we should be feeding them that accurate information. So it wouldn't hurt to try again.
Okay, great. Well, let's keep that in the back of our mind as we go forward. Any further questions? Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
On, it's not numbered, but on the, must be about page 4, the table chart page of our handout that shows the flow chart.
Mhm.
That comes from the data fiscal book. And in talking with our fiscal staff, the box at the very bottom, the school major maintenance is one, and the school state penitentiary capital construction account, both items created by the legislature. There is some possible discussion of which one has a priority, so which one should get funded first. And when Representative Harshman and I worked on this a couple years ago, our intent was the school major maintenance piece was the first priority, the school or the prison account was the second priority. And so it may be wise of us to draft a bill that just enforces that, so that we know so that the fiscal folks, the number folks know that that's the intent, to that when the money flows in, the 45% of SIPA going to school major maintenance gets funded first. And then if there's an additional 10 million, then the school or the penitentiary account would be filled. So any food for thought or any thought from other committee members on that?
1 second, Senator Landon, I just had one question. Am I mistaken, but isn't there something happening with the Wyoming State Penitentiary Capital Construction Account? Isn't it, did I hear that it's going to change or go away? Or was there talk about that?
Mr. Chairman, the penitentiary account in the last session, there was a lot of discussions of suspending its tip, having it go away completely. To my knowledge, we did not accomplish any of that, but it was certainly, or to my memory, I shouldn't say my knowledge, my memory. Nothing was finalized, but there was discussions around that. So this is somewhat of a proactive approach of saying, as long as that account is on the books, we want to make sure that it's known that the major maintenance for schools is the first priority of those funds when received.
Okay, just a second, Senator Landon first, and then
Well,
Representative Hartman.
Mr. Chairman, just for the sake of further discussion, if that was a motion by the good representative, I would second that, that we ask our staff to draft that legislation that would clarify what the representative just outlined. So I'll second it.
Was that a motion?
That was a
That
motion.
was a motion, it was, and we do have a second. Okay, discussion on the motion. Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, and I want to add to this motion at the proper time, so I'm not going to monkey with this right now, so I'll make a separate motion, but I think we really could clean up that penitentiary account, and I think it's just and I apologize, that was my dumb bill, and that was 5 years ago, and remember, we thought we had a crisis and we're going to have to rebuild a prison by now, and the original bill was 50 million a year. Next year came back and modified that to 10, because then we learned, well, it's going to be probably 20, 30. But anyway, that's really one elementary school a year. You could put people to work now instead of putting it in an account somewhere for something for, that's this argument we always have over today's people or tomorrow's people. And I think it'd be good for us to revisit that. 10 million a year for penitentiaries. It's silly. It's a dumb bill, and I apologize. But undoing it is, another deal we're gonna need to work at. But anyway, that'll come later. So, but anyway, don't you agree that was a dumb bill, Mr. Chairman? It's a question.
Yeah, Representative Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess my question is on the actual motion is we're interested in making the state major maintenance the focus. But I guess my question is do we have a number? You're talking about making it the focus and the main priority. Do we have a number at which you're wanting to cap it and we're just not going to put anything else in the state penitentiary account? Are you wanting to clean that up? Maybe a little bit more clarity on what the motion actually entails before I am willing to vote on it.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The motion is just simply that of the two items listed in that lowest box, that we would designate the school major maintenance piece to be the number one priority when funding comes in, followed by the penitentiary account. Because currently it could be interpreted that they would both be filled equally at the same time until the penitentiary account were to have its 10 million for its annual allocation. And then the school major maintenance would continue. And so this just says school major maintenance gets money first and then the penitentiary account would get the money is the intent. And it really comes from our fiscal folks saying that there's a little bit of gray area on how those two buckets should fill. And this is just us, would just be our desire to say school major maintenance is first priority of those two issues.
So Representative Walters, tell me what the formula would be to fill those.
Yeah.
I understand what Representative Brown is getting at. There's probably got to be a formula where the school major maintenance account would be filled to a certain point before anything tips over into the
Well, thank you, Mr.
Penitentiary
Chairman.
account.
So SIPA becomes a known amount at the end of the year. And so I'm just going to use a round number of $1 million, just for simplicity's sake. So the SIPA this year is going to have $1 million in it. 45 of that is going to school major maintenance. But say, and then 10 million will go over to the penitentiary, or then the remainder would go to the penitentiary to fill it. But say there was not, after you did SIPA and took 45% of it to school major maintenance, if there's not 10 million left to fill the penitentiary account, the penitentiary account may only get 8 million that year, it may only get 5 million if there's not enough. Because one is a percentage and one is a known dollar value. And so the percentage gets taken care of in this motion. The major maintenance for schools is the number one priority. So it will get fully funded at 45%. Whatever that number, whatever that dollar value is, we will not know until each year takes place. So it will, school major maintenance will get 45% of what's in that account every year. Then if there is 10 million available, the prison account will get 10 million. If there is not 10 million available, the prison account will only get 7, 8, 9.5, whatever that magic number is.
I understand.
And so that is the intent, is to say the 45% is the first priority and money left over up to 10 would go to prisons. But we're really wanting to focus on school major maintenance. And it's kind of hinky because we are talking a percentage of the account and a fixed dollar value as opposed to 2 percentages or 2 fixed dollar values. But that's how functionally how it would work is there could potentially not be enough to meet the 10 million every year for the prison account based on this motion, because we are saying the full value of the major maintenance for schools is going to be funded first priority in this motion.
Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, so in essence, if I understand correctly, Representative Walters, what you're looking at doing is creating a new box, and you're going to have another flow down to the number 2. You wouldn't be carrying them in the same box. You would guarantee the 45%, and then anything above and beyond that tip would then go to. So we would, in essence, be striking the 10 million. And if it's up and over, anything over that 45%, so 55% in essence goes to the state penitentiary. Am I right on that?
Representative.
I think, Mr. Chairman, first of all, the SIPA is guaranteed. That, so we guarantee 2.5% to the general fund, and the 1.25% to the SIPA. So 3.75% of the spending policy, if we don't make the 5% SPA, flows back from the reserve account. So the whole SIPA is guaranteed. I think the question in the statute that we're going to need an answer to, and I think it says it in there, if we staff has got that looked up for us, but I think it says the first 10 million of the SIPA. And I think that's what you're trying to get at is is it the first 10 million or after the 45% is taken out, the next 10 million? That's how I understand the motion, but I think we can get some clarity. I'm looking over. I think they got the answer for us. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, you're correct. It is a technical correction to the statutes. It was the intent of the bringers of the bill to have the major maintenance, that account to be dealt with first, and then any overflow to the penitentiary. And we think it's as simple as adding just one sentence or just a entry sentence that would read, after all transfers under 9-4-220B Romanet I. And then, and then the language about how that would be operationalized.
Okay.
It's
All
a
right.
technical correction that our office brought to the attention of the chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, not amendment, but oh, yes, we have another motion on, or another, Senator, Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, and I think if we can put this in this kind of cleanup bill that we're talking about, there's two other issues that we talked about is whether that flow from the state royalties needs a tip or an automatic tip, or it has to be a budget amendment. That's an issue. And then I'd like to talk about this 10 million to the state penitentiary. So I want to talk about the state penitentiary first in the same statute. So if you look at your flow chart on your handout where it says number 2, Wyoming State Penitentiary Capital Construction Account. So my amendment, Mr. Chairman, would be just to take out state penitentiary and put school. Put the word school in, Wyoming School Capital Construction Account would be 10 million.
Second. We have a second, Senator Landon? Oh, you seconded it.
I
said. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, discussion, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, just to pick up on where Representative Harshman took us with this, I think he's onto something. I served on the task force back then when the good representative came up with the idea that maybe we better start putting some money aside for a state penitentiary. And then you remember that several of us got our heads together and figured out how to fix the state penitentiary for far less dollars than we were looking at the time. And all of that mitigation effort has really paid off down there. We've shored up foundations, we've gotten water away from the building, we have built brand new roofs on that place, and all the work that's been done has really paid off. So, we're good to go for 20, 25, maybe 30 years on that front. And, I guess the question that we have for ourselves is, why are we setting money aside for something that we really don't need at this point in time? So I'm inclined to support this. I think it's a good recommendation that we could take forward.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the flow chart and just trying to, I guess, figure out exactly what Representative Harshman is saying. We want to pretty much totally eliminate putting money into the Wyoming Penitentiary account. And what's going to happen with what's been put in there already? Can you answer that for me, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, and I think there's 20 million in that account now. And it's because it's just gotten started, and we could deal with that. We could transfer that if we wanted to the, there already is a penitentiary permanent land fund account. And that has tens of millions of dollars in it. And I know on appropriations, they've used it for repairs over the years, those kind of things. And that goes back to, statehood, active admission. And so I think that's a separate question we could talk about. I think it's 20 or 30 million that is in that account. And somebody will get us that answer, but I think we can deal with that separately. But the idea really is about this, we're trying to solve this problem today with today's dollars for today, because this is investment earnings for today's people. That's what the spending policy is. It's for to be used, and we've saved the most of it, obviously. Most of it's saved, but this part is for today's people. And we create, and really the idea behind that 5 years ago, when I brought this bill, was 50 million a year. And we thought in 4 years, we'd have 200 million bucks. That was our plan, really, to try to do it. And that changed. So I think, this is an issue for today's people, and talking about tax increases, everything else. I think we got to get our revenue and investment flows first before we talk taxes. So anyway, that's it.
Okay, so as I understand it then,
Mr. Chairman,
oh.
I had a follow-up.
okay,
you
yes.
don't mind?
Senator,
Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Chairman, and this is directed to the representative again. Why not then put all the money into the school major maintenance account instead of making another account?
Representative Harshman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you could. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I just think, and I don't even know if you need the thing that we put school major maintenance on number one, because frankly, politically, and the leadership in the Senate was very big on maintenance. And I agree, we all agree, because we've made billions of dollars in investment. And that was a big mistake in the 80s and 90s in our state. That's why we have gotten into the catch-up mode. We built stuff in the 80s and 90s and we didn't repair anything. We were just flat broke. And I think we've tried to learn our lesson and make sure we're doing major maintenance. So that's why that was specifically said like that. But there is a capital construction side. We're going to continue to build elementary schools. We have since statehood, and we will continue to. And I think to put 10 million, what is that? Yeah, it's probably one elementary school a year, and that's going to happen every year. We're going to see that in the budget on this committee. So, but you wouldn't have to, but I just made it simple, take out 2 words, put in 1 word. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further discussion on that? So the amendment or the motion is to basically remove the penitentiary capital construction account out of that box and put in the school capital construction account.
Question?
Everybody's good with that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion's carried. Any further motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, and that 20, is it 20 million or 30 million? Did we find out? Anyway? 30.
Leanne
million.
is working on that, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
to find the number.
Whatever the number.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't know if we wanted to, because the good senator brought that up, what to do with that. Do we want to do anything with it? You want to sit it? There's a couple of options. You could probably transfer it to the permanent prison account if you wanted to, or you could transfer it to the school construction account. So I just throw that out there, Mr. Chairman, and you could get rid of one little bucket out there.
Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate those thoughts too. And Senator Rothfuss actually reminded us of what we've done through the years. And it is our job to, we're facing this deficit on school capital construction account, which includes major maintenance and all the things we do for our schools. We need to make a recommendation, and part of that recommendation, I think, is how do we close this gap? Well, we've got an account sitting there that we don't need. What we do need is to pay for some major maintenance of our schools. So that 20 million could certainly, we could recommend to our colleagues in the legislature to transfer that money.
Are we looking at transferring it into the major maintenance or into the school capital construction? What was your,
I think that's the question.
They're one and the same.
well, they're not. They're actually two. Right? The SSCA,
Mr. Chairman, I
Correct.
think we still have the SCCA,
yes.
yeah, out of the SCCA. So I think it's contemplated as almost a sub-account concept. But if I'm not mistaken, we just have the SCCA and then we pay for major maintenance first out of the SCCA.
So,
And then we pay for the rest of the funding out of it.
so
I
the
think,
intent would be putting it all into the SSCA.
yeah,
Okay.
and then have potentially a separate conversation about how much we spend on major maintenance as part of the budget versus how much we spend on building based on priorities. But I don't think we can make that decision now.
So Senator Pappas, just to add to those thoughts, we have often worked really hard to go forward to our colleagues with this notion of major maintenance, but it all comes out of the same account. I mean, it's the school capital construction account. It's all paid for under there. But it's easy to get misconstrued that it's all about construction. Well, a lot of what we do on this committee is to take care of the buildings we already have. And so that school capital construction account, under that account, that's what we take care of our major maintenance as well. And so it's really one account. And by the way, that's not going to close the gap all the way, but it's something for us to think about. We could certainly make a recommendation that prison account be transferred over. So
Senator Landon, are you making a motion to do that?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, do I hear a second? Oh, and we have a second. Okay. Discussion on making that transfer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay. All right, that motion is carried. Any further motions or discussions on this topic? Hearing none. Yeah.
Sorry,
Representative
just
Hushman.
making too many motions. I about got my quota today and I'll be done. But I think, do we want to talk about that? Or is it a big deal at all? Because it flows right now into this mineral royalty account. Or we changed that. We went back to the Constitution, got rid of that 1990 statute that capped it at 8 million. Now we go to a full third. And it flows, we created a little bucket because we wanted to see it before it automatically flowed into the, so it takes legislative action to do that. Do you want it? And so right now it's done in the budget bill, correct, Mr.? And do you want to just make that automatic? So I just throw that out there for discussion, Mr.
I
Chairman.
think that Senator Rothfuss, you had a comment on that one, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it needs to be automatic. It's an incredibly high priority. We need to ensure, particularly the major maintenance gets funded. This is the mechanism we're using right now. I don't honestly know why we need to keep looking at it and then approving. To be honest with you, this is a priority. So I'd make the motion to include in our draft, automating that process instead of having it subject to review. And again, it's a good debate for the whole Senate to have, but I think from our perspective, as trying to manage this fleet of schools, it's the responsible and appropriate policy to automate that. So that's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Senator Landon.
Just a quick discussion point. I will likely support the motion just simply because I think that debate needs to go forward. But traditionally, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, the Senate side of our House has been reluctant to automatically have that money flow into the account. So we're likely to run into some resistance there, although I can't predict for sure, but it makes sense to me. We know we're going to need it there, and we know that we're going to eventually put it there. So it's just a policy decision. And the motion's on the table. So
Well, it does create the conversation. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My big question, when we talk about automating this process of putting these funds into this account, it makes sense. It's a priority to do this. And what the two senators are saying, one makes sense, one, there's going to be some resistance. For me, being new to this committee and trying to understand, why would there be that reluctance? Why is there that reluctance? What's the pushback? Is it the fact that we won't see what exactly is going into that account? Either one of you can answer that if you don't mind. Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it really just comes down to, in recent years, there has been a desire in the Senate to sort of approve all of the steps and not have the funding streams freely flow. And in the House, there has been more of an interest in having the revenue streams match the expenditures more than in the Senate. And really, I think it's a matter of philosophy, and it is certainly a debatable issue, how you want that to take place. There are obviously a lot of decisions that should be made every year. So I understand where some senators are coming from about having oversight. To me, there are some that you have to pay your bills. And this is one where we have to pay the bill, and honestly, bringing it as a bill gives us an opportunity to talk about it again and make that decision. So it will have the opportunity to be debated, but it's kind of like with your checking account. You don't sit down and decide whether to pay the electrical bill if you've got money in the checking account. You pay the electrical bill. There are some things that you pay. They come out at the beginning, and then you're looking to see what you have afterwards as you're budgeting. The idea that we're putting major maintenance on the table and we're considering that fungible each year, it seems then to the Senate that we have more money to spend. We don't have this money to spend. This is not money that I would call on the table. Otherwise, we're borrowing from the future effectively, and it's fiscally irresponsible, which has always been my argument for increasing our major maintenance from 2% where we're at right now to we got an estimate of 2.75% is the most fiscally responsible in the long term. Even now, we're borrowing from future generations and eroding the value of the schools because we don't want to spend the money now. 2% is where there has been agreement. So I hope that gives a little bit of background and provides the context there, Senator.
Yeah, what will happen is we'll end up back where we were in the 80s and 90s and not fund it. And then the cycle will continue. So, okay. Any further questions? Yeah. Yes.
It's not a question, but I was looking for the specific number of what we had in the current standard budget, and I did find it. It was $153 million for the biennium, is specifically for major maintenance. And then we have in one of the documents we'll be looking at in a little bit that 158.6 is what we'd be looking at, which I assume is a 2%. So that we just have a concept of what we're talking about there. It would basically be allocating the first $158 million, assuming that these numbers stand. Thank you.
Okay. See, we have a motion on the table, right? Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Okay, the motion is carried. Any further discussion, further motions? Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a bill that will likely come to us in our second meeting for consideration. Then we've added some thoughts for our staff, and I'm just kind of looking over there to make sure they got it, but several additional amended notions and hopefully we would see that in the second meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
I believe, will that be the scope of all the motions that we've made today? Would that be in a single bill?
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding of the motions that were passed, is that it is a single bill. I think there were 4 separate elements to it.
Okay, all right.
Just a little cleanup.
Okay. Yeah. Senator Rothfuss.
And one other thing we can consider in that bill, but I don't necessarily think we should have a motion now, really is that percentage that we want, whether we want to recommend staying at 2%, but it's not an appropriate time right now to have that motion. And honestly, we could be talking about that at the next meeting, make a decision and amend it in, because I think it's part of the subject, but I don't think we've had enough discussion to really get to that point yet.
And that actually is a bigger issue.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
It may want its own.
Very possibly, but
Well-
the regrettable thing about having it be its own bill is it actually affects everything else. All of the rest of the budgeting numbers would be dramatically changed by that. So it might be a little bit of a challenge to do them separately, but we can see again.
But
just
you
a
may
thing-
jeopardize the rest of the things. in the
That is
bill.
accurate. That is accurate.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. We should at least make it an agenda discussion.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, committee, any further items on this before I actually open it to public comment? Hearing none, is there any public comment on this particular topic? Anybody out there? No. Okay, well then I'll close public comment. I believe that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is break, but it's too early for that. I don't think there's anyone online. Is that correct? Yeah. So
kind of lonely without some
some zoomies out there. Okay, well, let's move on to item 5 on our agenda, federal spending guidelines and expenditures. Could I have the staff please take it away?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. The purpose of this agenda item was to receive information from the State Construction Department, the School Facilities Division. The former chairman asked us to coordinate with that agency to determine if there was a possibility of utilizing some of the COVID funding for elements like HVAC or other items that may be approved through those guidelines. And as you know, the guidance on that is forthcoming, but there have been a couple of different documents that have been released to inform those items. And like I said, things like HVAC or other items that are related to facilities, that's the purpose of this agenda item. And so I would ask that the School Facilities Department, Division, State Construction Department present that information now.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, Director Vincent, welcome. Glad to have you here. Both you and I are new in these roles, so appreciate the working relationship we'll have and coming in the future. And I'll let you please. Could you take a moment and for the entire committee and give us a little bit about your background and
Sure,
where you're coming from, and so we can get to know you a little better.
sure. So.
Yeah, what are you doing in Wyoming?
Pardon me?
What are you doing in
What am I
Wyoming?
doing in Wyoming? So my name is Jerry Vincent. I'm your incoming director. I've been on the job for about a month and a half, fully relocated over here in the past few weeks. My background is in schools and facilities. I work for 3 school architect firms. I work for a construction firm that largely did schools. I was vice president. I've worked for 4 school districts. I've consulted about 90 throughout the West Coast, and everything from facilities to planning to site acquisition to post-occupancy evaluation, sort of cradle to grave. Why do I come to Wyoming? Because I think the challenge here, and this is where I'm from, Minnesota. So I've been on the West Coast, but I'm from Minnesota, and Wyoming feels very much like the Minnesota that I left years ago. And so it's a good fit for me and the lifestyle and the job and the challenges of the job. So we would like to, today we have 4 of us, but for this topic right here, I have some comments about it, and we have Laura Anderson, who is our planning and finance administrator. So we'll walk through that. And then if this afternoon, we'll have Troy Decker join us. And then we have online Paul Severson, who will go over some things. But as it relates to COVID, we want to outline the portion that we've been given so far, as a guideline, and then some of the preparation that we're trying to do for that to help you maybe make some decisions and go forward. We're trying to put a framework together, as you are, with something that we don't have full knowledge of yet. So we're trying to be proactive and do what we can. So with that, Laura, would you like to walk us through this?
Sure. So we have provided a packet. We can kind of go through that if you'd like to use that for reference. We are actually responding to communication we got from the Legislative Service Office asking us to cover a few topics, one of which was existing COVID funds and what those could be used for, answering the specifics of how those funds could be used with K through 12 facilities, and answering 2 primary questions, which is how much has been received and what's the money been spent on, which is important for you to know, and do those expenditures impact the overall condition of the buildings, and if so, how? So the first place to start is with the COVID funds. And the federal government provided what's called the ESSER, or the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds. Those are provided through all the state education agencies. Every state has one primary state education agency. For Wyoming, it is the Wyoming Department of Education, or WDE. So the funds flow through the Department of Education, and then the districts can apply for sub-grants to address specific needs that are in the federal legislation. In regards to K through 12, I've listed here on your packet, there are 2 items that the school districts can use in relation to facilities. one of which is school facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards and to support student health needs. The second is inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality in school facilities, including mechanical and non-mechanical heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, filtering, purification, and other air cleaning, fans, control systems, and window and door repair replacement. So that doesn't really help you out because you don't know what they got and what they spent it on. So in order to try and compile the information for you, we reached out to our partners at WDE because they are the direct recipient of those funds. We have no purview over those. We reached out to them. They provided us with some information. We put it into a table for you. It is on pages 3 and 4 with the information that they provided. And I believe Trent Carroll and Shelley Hamill are on digitally and can answer questions on WDE funding. The next step that we did was we wanted to try and provide you more information directly from the districts. So we sent out a request for information to the districts, asking them specifically three types of questions. First of all, what did you apply for? What did you get? And what are you planning on applying for? That information is also provided on your packet in pages 5 through 12. Pages 5 through 8 is what they've applied for, and you'll see kind of a color coding in blue. And then in bottom of page 8 through page 10, there's what they received, which is in yellow. And then on pages 10 through 12, we have what they are anticipating on applying for, which is in green. We didn't want to speak for the districts. We wanted them to be able to speak for themselves and to answer those questions directly for you. So we just provided that information for you. The second question that you had about, do the expenditures impact the overall condition of the buildings, and if so, how? If they're spending it on component systems or maintenance systems that would then not have to be repaired with major maintenance dollars, and those major maintenance dollars could go further, yes, it would impact it, but we don't know exactly how because we don't have an accurate accounting of all those systems and how they've applied those funds. So we've been having discussions with the Department of Education. We've already had some preliminary conversations. They will be receiving all the reporting on those funds about how we can coordinate, because we have, as you well know, our AIM database, which is our asset management database, where we keep all of the information on all the components and the schools and what projects they're doing. And we want to make sure that we're in some way incorporating that information that WDE gets on these projects within the database so we can make a more accurate determination. But they're still at the preliminary stages. All of these federal funds, as you know, are kind of at the preliminary stages, so we don't have exact data, but we are working towards a plan with them to try and come up with some information.
Ms. Anderson, could I, are there amounts linked to ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 accounts? Is there an amount for each program?
I believe that would be WDE information. I apologize, I don't have that. I don't know if maybe Trent or Shelley is on the phone or on the internet could answer that question if they're available.
Okay. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Anderson, I might just be riding a little bit slower horse this morning, but I'll try to spur and catch up with your help. So one of the reasons that we reached out to our school districts was to try to get some kind of an indication of whether or not they have addressed some things that we might be talking about later in the day. So how is it that the select committee is going to know if a district has already addressed what we might consider on the component project list, for example? Now we don't really know that because and by the way, I really appreciate the districts who did try to help us. So I commend them for that, but it looks like we did not get much feedback. And so that puts us at a real disadvantage to try to devote a lot of attention to a component list when we have no idea that maybe a district's already mitigated that situation. Does that make sense? Am I following correctly?
Yes, sir, it does. And we got responses back from 23 out of the 48 school districts. I don't know if it was partially because of the tight time frame in preparation for this meeting from the time we got the request to when we needed to get the information back. I don't know if the school districts didn't have enough time to respond or what the inclination was for the lack of response. I can't speak to that. I do understand your question and why you're asking, and I agree with you. Just without that information from the districts, we're a little bit at a loss as well. I would say I'm not aware that any of the districts that are on the component project, particularly in the top half of the component project list, has repaired those projects. I'm not aware of that, but that is something we can certainly get information on and provide back to the committee.
Okay. Director, looked like you wanted to speak. Did you have something to say?
I was going to agree with the senator. We have 20, I wish we could have got more than 23 responses out of 48 because we are trying to figure out what is their priority, what is their concern. We did give around a week, I believe, a little bit more for response. We did a couple of follow-ups with, reminder, end of day Friday kind of thing. And then none of them came in after our deadline in order to go to packet. But I would appreciate a larger response from the district so that we can all serve them. We can represent them correctly in information we're giving you in order to make decisions on. I don't think 23 out of 48 is a good sample size.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Henderson, in your report, it said that the funds need to be obligated by September 30th, 2022. That obligation, what does that entail? Obviously not constructed or not, but are the funds obligated by the state or by the district? What does that entail?
Honestly, sir, I don't deal with federal funds very often. That's not something that comes to do with the state construction department. And that would be a question that would be for the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on that also and really understand whom we should talk to about how this works. And we don't necessarily have to find all the details today, but as I'm looking through this material, I have a lot of questions, and it sounds like you don't necessarily have the answer to those questions, that WDE has the answer to those questions. So yeah, if you could let us know whom we should talk to there, or we can ping them also and find out, but we can follow up with them. I do have just a little bit of question though about some delineations that are the school facilities related aspects of these reports. So I'm looking at in this packet, on the list, we've got the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 request for facilities list, followed by a separate list that I'm honestly struggling to understand what's different about it, because this looks like it's related to school facilities, also incorporates some ESSER, but not the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, and also has CARES and ARP and ARPA. So what's the difference between these first two lists? What am I not understanding? I see the others relate to types of funds. I get that, but basically all the blue.
Okay, the first two pages, pages 3 and 4, that's the information that the Wyoming Department of Education provided for us. They are the granting agency, so they get the funds directly from the feds. And then the districts apply for subgrants under them. These are the grants that they have, as I understand it, these are the ones that they've actually approved to go forth that have been applied for through them. The ESSER, I believe, came out it's supposed to come out, I believe, in 3 phases, if I understand it correctly from WDE. So there'd be a first phase, that's ESSER 1, second phase is ESSER 2, and I believe ESSER 3 would be forthcoming. And so that's the information that they provided for us. The color choice was not good since we reused the color choice. I apologize for that. So then when you turn to page 5, this is when we put out the request for information from the districts, their responses. And we asked it in 3 phases. We asked, what have you applied for? What have you, what have you received? And then what are you intending to apply for that you have knowledge of that maybe you're planning on applying for? So from our thought process there is, if someone's got an HVAC or an air purification system and they've already gotten money from the ESSER, we wanted to know, did you already get money from that, and are you using it? What's your intention of using those funds? How are you using them? And then if not, are you, have you received those funds, or are you looking forward to maybe the ARP, which no one really knows a lot of information about, because trust me, I'm on that website multiple times every day looking for an update. They just don't have that guidance yet. And so if maybe the school districts are planning on making an application for ARP funds to address those issues, that was our thought process in trying to provide you as much detailed information as we could with the districts. Does that help?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And a quick follow-up. So the first list then, this is money that was granted to WDE for distribution to districts. These are the specific projects that were on that list that are related to school facilities. All of these have been approved, is what I understand, but I see request pending review. So how should I interpret the status of pages 3 and 4 with regard to the WDE funding, whether or not it's actually going through or not?
And sir, we were told, or was hoping that WDE was on the line, because this is their list and process as part of this package. I struggled through it myself in the same way you did, and I had to look up above to see request versus expenditure. And I think our goal was to try to share of the ESSER, what has been requested and what has been expended. So then we roll into the next pages on what might qualify or be asked for as part of ARP. So we were trying to lay that information out, taking half of the information from the districts and taking the other half from WDE, and then reporting both of those pieces out as the State Department. So we have some questions as well.
All right.
Senator Rothfuss, I
Thank
believe
you.
WDE is on Zoom.
They
So-
are.
So can we
Yeah,
have them address your questions?
perfect. Thank you.
There she goes. She's unmuted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Shelley Hamill with Wyoming Department of Education. I apologize for our late addition. We were kind of following the agenda, but know that you can often move a little bit faster. So in regards to pages 2 and 3 of your report, we attempted to provide information as current as we had it to share. So what you're seeing on page 3 and 4 are budget amounts. So when a school district receives their allocation for their ESSER 1, 2, or ARP ESSER dollars, they go in and they complete an application which details what they potentially plan to use their money on for. And so I use the word potential simply because they're able to amend that application at any time. So what you're seeing here is for the amount budgeted, that's what they've budgeted. And it looks like the that column that says amount budgeted, it's typically tied to mostly ESSER 1. So items that districts budgeted that we could pull from their applications. And then where it says request pending review, those are items that are again listed in their ESSER 2 application that they indicate that they might use those funds on. So at this point, the final column, amount spent, shows what funding has been spent, but not necessarily as detailed as potentially what you're asking. So we approve the application at the WDE based on if the district's request or their plan that they've submitted in their application, if it actually meets the allowable expenses, or if the items that they're identifying as potential use, if those are allowable expenses under that funding source. And when we approve that, then we wait until they ask for reimbursement for that expense. So at that point, that's when we would be aware if any funding was used for that.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Shelley, I have a couple of questions on it. The first is with regard to the process here. And as I understand it, with these funds, the funds are allocated to districts based on a set formula. And this approval process really is for acceptable use, not necessarily for specific allocation of funds. Is that accurate? The approval is really, yes, that's an acceptable use, but you already have these dollars allocated to you based on the federal formula. Is that fair?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, yes, that's pretty accurate. So when we get the federal grant award, we are required for the ESSER funds to use the Title I Part A formula allocation for our districts. Each district is notified then of their full award amount, and then they know how much they have to utilize, and they're informed about what the allowable uses are. So, maybe going back to that pending review on page 3 and 4, that pending review shows ESSER 1 requests, but I think there were also a couple of ESSER 2 requests because we do have districts starting to submit their applications for that.
Representative Walters?
No follow-up?
Oh, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, quick.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just had one more about CARES. CARES funding would be the same way. How much additional is there beyond ESSER that will be distributed to districts? I don't even really know what that is. And then I'm going to ask the same question about ARP, which we might not know yet, but we've got this on our page 5. If you're looking at the same thing that we've got, which talks about, we've got ESSER, which is pretty clear to me, but then it says CARES. I don't know what else CARES is offering in addition to the ESSER component. And same question for ARP.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss. So I think there's some confusion around the language. So the CARES Act was the first statutory language that was released at the federal level. And that's what typically covers the ESSER 1 and GEAR 1. And then, and that was in early March of 2020. And then in December of 2020, a second iteration, which you will often hear referred to as either CARISA or CIRSA, depending on what part of the country you're in. And that was the second iteration of funding. And so you'll hear people say ESSER 2 or GEAR 2, and that's where the EANS, the funding for private schools came in as well. And then fast forward to April of 2021, the third allocation, or the American Rescue Plan, so the ARP funds, those were released then. And you'll hear people say ARP ESSER or ESSER 3, and those mean the same thing. So I hope that helps kind of level set a little bit.
Yeah.
And then in regards to the question about the amount of funding, ESSER 1, the minimum distribution that was required to our school districts in the state was just over 29 million. ESSER 2, the LEA allocation minimum distribution was just under 122 million. And then for ARP ESSER, well, we haven't yet been able to release those funds to our districts. We know that the minimum LEA distribution will be just over $273 million.
200 and what?
73 million.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Shelley, is that what is called what has been called the ESSER 3?
Yes.
Okay. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Shelley, my question is, you say the districts submit for approval. Is it WDE that's approving those when they are submitted, or is it WDE passing it on to the federal partner who then is the ultimate decider of approval on those projects?
Mr. Chairman and committee member, I'm sorry, I'm not able to see who I'm talking to. So I just want to let you know that when the WDE does put out the application, and then we approve those requests. We really don't have the authority to disapprove or not allow a district to spend those funds as long as the planned expenditure is allowable by federal statute.
Okay,
Okay.
follow,
Go ahead.
follow up, and Shelley, on a slightly different topic, but still related. Who within your office can be working with the state construction department school facilities? Because having Department of Ed working on school facilities is somewhat of a new concept, and making sure that we aren't going down two parallel highways with blinders on. And how can we get some better cooperation and collaboration as we spend these federal dollars on school facility improvements, so that the state construction side knows what the WDE and the districts has done, instead of, it's like I said, it appears that there seems to be a little disconnect at this point.
Mr. Chairman and committee member, that's a great question, and certainly one that we've discussed internally at the WDE. So in our guidance documents supporting districts, we definitely send them through the appropriate channels, because we don't feel like at the WD we have the knowledge base to be approving certain types of expenditures when it comes to facilities, if there were renovations or builds or things like that. So we recognize that there are state processes that need to be in place and followed as well. So our piece of that would be simply to approve that, yes, school district, you have submitted an application that has an allowable expense. We would not know if they were actually in motion or doing that work until they asked for reimbursement of funds. We can certainly continue to communicate with the Facilities Commission to ensure that as requests come in the applications, that we identify what those requests are, or what their application indicates that they may be planning to do, so that there can be some communication with the district at that point. And I see that our Chief Operations Officer, Trent Carroll, has joined us, and he may want to add some to that as well.
Go ahead, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shelley, good information, but I think it is imperative that the WDE and state construction are working together, because every district has gone through a facilities plan with the state construction department. And so as these projects are coming to your office, making sure they're following the needs on that facility plan can help us to better spend the federal dollars, and not end up in a situation where a district is spending federal dollars on something that might be a little bit more superficial when they really have higher needs based on their facility plans. And so having that cooperation between the two agencies, I think, is imperative to make sure we spend these federal dollars most wisely, but then also to be able to save state dollars going forward in certain instances. And so would certainly hope that you and your office and our state construction office could get together on how those reimbursements come in, and how those districts are working on these projects.
Thank you, Representative Walters. I think too that not only do we want to just encourage cooperation, I think we need liaisons from both offices, point people that will actually work together on a daily basis for this. So I would like, I don't know if there is someone at WDE who can be appointed to that position, as well as someone from the school facilities department. But that I would like to see names of folks that will actually work on a daily basis together to work out these issues, to make that collaboration and cooperation happen. I don't know if you're prepared to, Shelley, to forward someone to us today, or whether the director has someone in mind on his side, but I'd like that to happen. Yeah, Senator Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And two concerns adding on to that as well. Obviously, if there updating boilers, doing a number of things that would be considered preventative maintenance on our part, the savings of money to us, so the feds get that, like Representative was talking about, is critical. But also on top of that, I think we need to look at if they're adding something additional that's going to require maintenance in the future, that should be their responsibility and not major maintenance responsibility. So I noticed there's some bleachers being put in and stuff like that. I think that needs to be noted some way so that we can say, okay, that's not something that we've allocated or said is appropriate. So if you're going to add that with federal money, you better make sure you have the finances to be able to maintain it as well.
Well, that would be only if it's outside of our adequacy standards. If they're within our adequacy standards, they're still eligible for maintenance. So Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for Mrs. Hamel. And it kind of piggybacks on what Senator Cost was saying in regards to the allowable things that people ask for. I too noticed some really bizarre things that didn't fit into the allowable category, but I did notice you guys did not, they did not receive anything for those things. What I'm wondering with this pitiful list of who actually responded to the survey, the 23 out of 48 county districts, is there a slight possibility that the rest of the school districts didn't apply for this money at all?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hutchings or Senator Hutchings, sorry, it's interesting in that school districts all have applied for these funds. It's by a formulaic distribution, so they each get an allocation. Certainly a school district would have the option of not using those funds or taking those funds, but we do have all districts, all 48 of our school districts did apply for ESSER 1 funds. And we have many districts turning in their applications for the ESSER 2, the ARP ESSER or ESSER 3 funds. The application has not yet been released. We're not able to make that available just yet. But the information on page 3 and 4, those intended expenses were pulled directly off of school district applications for those funds. I can't really speak to the information that came through the survey because I've never seen this survey and I didn't have anything to do with that at all. So I can only speak to pages 3 and 4. And those are just items that were identified that we were able to pull out that looked like things that might be of interest to this committee.
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick follow-up, Mrs. Hamel. On page 8, I noticed one school, they put in money or a request for school lunches, lunch supplies, school supplies, activities, Chromebooks, summer school. It does not, one thing seems to be COVID related except for the cleaning supplies or the PPE. How did you guys decide to give that particular district money for those particular items?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee member Hutchings. Yes, those are all allowable expenses under the COVID relief funds in all 3 buckets, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further questions? Director, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you. So to your first question on who our liaisons would be, typically and over time, this would be our school facilities administrator would be our lead to work with WDE, but that's a vacant position right now. So right now you're looking at that. Myself and Laura will be tag teaming as liaisons and working with them. So,
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
all right. And Shelley, is there anyone at the WDE that would be a liaison with the school facilities department?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So at this point, I would suggest that both myself and Trent Carroll are the liaisons at this point. I think that would be most efficient.
Okay. Representative Landon?
Shelley, just that's okay, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, Shelley, so my assumption is then that when any of these grant applications come through, either yourself or Trent is personally reviewing these expenditures, and when you guys find something that may be directly related to major maintenance, capital construction, anything along those lines that would fall underneath the school facilities, you guys will actually see them. This is not somebody below you that may not have that authority to go directly to school facilities. This will be you two reviewing these applications.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Landon, that's a great question. So Trenton and myself, we don't actually review those applications. So we do have currently an individual on contract to review those and work with our internal ESSA grants team to review those. They are pulling any of that information directly from the grants that meet those categories that you just named and adding that to a spreadsheet for us. So that, and we've asked them to, we've given instruction that be very broad. Anything that they think at all resembles capital construction renovation changes to the building, that be added to the spreadsheet. We are also in the process of trying to secure a couple of AWAC numbers to be able to hire to build this team out. It's a lot of money and a lot of responsibility and moving pieces to implement the required oversight.
Thank you. And then a follow-up on that, Shelley, just to make sure I've got this 100%, in my head correctly here. You ultimately do not have the authority to say, no, you cannot spend this. And really what it ultimately boils down to is only if it's an allowable expense or not. If it's an allowable expense, you are basically held by the federal standards right now that you must approve that going forward. At that point, it then becomes a determination between your working group, as you just mentioned, that you're trying to build out, and school facilities as to whether or not that would fall underneath school facilities buckets, or that would fall underneath non-school facilities buckets. Is that right? Am I understanding this? Do I have it all right in my head?
Mr. Chairman, and in general, yes. So we would, you're absolutely correct. The first question I think that you asked is about our ability to approve requests. And so just recently, last week, the United States Department of Education released a frequently asked questions document. I think there's been a lot of confusion around the country about the ability of states and state education agencies to be able to funnel or limit the use of these funds to certain areas. And they were very explicit in this overview that we are not able to limit the uses and we're not able to even limit the use, the time allowed to be able to utilize the funds. So I think when the request comes to us, we're able to approve the application saying, yes, this is an allowable expense. And then when the request for reimbursement comes, we check that again. Was this used in an allowable manner? Did they meet all of the federal regulations, which are extensive? And of course, when it comes to building renovations or changes, there are additional federal regulations that need to be followed, including anything over $5,000 would need pre-approval. That's where we would certainly lock arms with the Facilities Commission and the state construction department to assist us with that. So there would be really kind of some parallel oversight. We would certainly be looking for oversight over the funding that it was used appropriately. But then the state construction department would need to be ensuring that our state processes were implemented and that the uses are in alignment with what our state would require for modifications or changes to buildings.
Shelley, I've got one more question for you. It sounds to me like the discussion of bringing in the state building department or state construction department and school facilities comes in at the reimbursement portion, not necessarily at the approval process. Is there a way that we can bring them in earlier in the process so that they're not just brought in on this after something's already been built, after something's already been brought forward? Can we link arms at an earlier state so we have a little bit better cohesion going forward, as opposed to them just picking up after school districts have already built on and done what they've done?
Thanks for that question to allow some clarification. So certainly, like I mentioned before, anything that's over $5,000 would need to be pre-approved when it comes to capital construction or it very broadly described, any changes to facilities in the federal language. I'm just going to use that kind of broad. And so that would be the point at which we would be able to say, oh, you want to do this, that's over $5,000. And we would be able to loop in then the state construction department for assistance there. As we continue to watch those applications come in with district plans, we would certainly be able to intervene and step in at that point to say, hey, remember, if you do move forward with this, you need to let us know, and we can be in contact with the state construction department as well to make sure that we build that in on an much earlier stage than the reimbursement.
Thank you, Shelley. Before we go further, Mr. Carroll has been patiently waiting there in the Zoom box. Trent, do you have anything you would like to speak to us about before I go forward?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, committee. I don't have a whole lot to add. Chief Hamill has done a pretty good job covering everything. Certainly appreciate the comments about coordination with State Construction Department. And we have been talking about some different ways that we can connect our data with their data. They have a pretty robust database over there that houses all of the data for facilities around the state. And certainly, as we build out our data collection and reporting capabilities for the ESSER funds, we will coordinate with them to allow those systems to interface with each other. And even though some of this will happen, maybe at the reimbursement stage, we want to try to build in several checkpoints along the way, the application process, the expenditure reimbursement, just making sure that all this information is ultimately recorded for each facility going forward. So that's really the only thing that I would add. I would just emphasize that we are working on that, and those discussions will continue. Certainly, Shelley and I will be in close touch with folks over there.
Okay. Committee, for the WDE and for the School Facilities Division of the State Construction Department, what I would like to do, if it's appropriate, is to, if you're both available next week to have an informal meeting, I would like to meet both with the WDE and with the State Construction Department, with whoever the liaisons are, and with staff, and just have a quick collaboration meeting just to discuss what we need to discuss about going forward. So if that's, and certainly any members of the committee is welcome to join, whoever's available. I'd invite anybody from the commission to also join us who are available. Again, an informal meeting, just just to start working together and get arms around this situation about collaboration and what we expect from each other. I just would like to do that. Is that possible? Would folks be available next week?
Mr. Chair, we will make ourselves available. We agree with everything that you and Representative Brown are saying. We don't have to have all the final art language and how it rolls out to put the framework together and how we're going to talk to each other and at what point we are involved with each other and how it's going to roll. So we would much rather do that on the front end than run into it in the middle and on the back end. So we'll make ourselves available.
Great. Shelley and Trent, are you available next week?
Yes, we could absolutely make ourselves available as well.
Okay, well, I'll ask staff to set up a meeting sometime next week and we'll find an appropriate time where everybody's available and we'll meet for an hour or so. Okay, thank you. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you have that meeting, I think it'd be good that we had maybe a quarterly or a periodic report back to us on how these funds are being spent. And so maybe as you work through it with these folks, you could come up with what a good timing or time frame would be to have these reports come back to us, just so we can better grasp what's being spent, how it's being spent, and where. And so if you would include that on your work, I would certainly appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think it, Representative Walters says it best, and then we're required to meet statutorily. I think it would just be in the best interest of all involved, that if we just have that as part of our standing committee materials as we move forward, to make sure that not only the Department of Ed has the information brought forward from all the school districts, but anything that does relate directly to the building department, that would be helpful, or construction department would be helpful as well.
Okay. All right, Senator Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably this is for Shelley, I'm not sure though. In a federal audit, are the districts going to be held accountable? Are you guys going to be held accountable, or both? How does that go?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Cost, that's a great question. So yes, in a federal audit, we are held accountable as the state SEA for the appropriate oversight of those funds, which is why we require substantial and robust documentation from our school districts, because ultimately they're actually spending it, but we have to answer to our federal auditors. So yes, both of us are on the hook for ensuring that we both at the LEA level and the state level follow all federal requirements.
Okay, thank you.
You've got
Director, please.
Thank you. So if I may, I think another good reason that we should all get together and discuss the framework of how this comes out is there's legislation, and some of this, it's in the art primarily, is it not? Or prior, that says that individual state legislators cannot we cannot put caveats on how and what this money will be spent on if it is allowable. So we just need to make sure that we're coordinating that on what we typically would do under a major maintenance. I like Representative Walters' idea. If we can combine and, get as much done with all these different pots as possible, we have to keep in mind that there are some things in here, and it'll probably be more spelled out when we get the rest of the guideline by the end of summer, that we as a state, and every state is not allowed to put caveats on that. You are going to do this before you do that. So we just want to be mindful of that when we have these meetings.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any further questions? Shelley, Trent, any further information you need to share with us?
No, thank you. Thanks for having us today. We look forward to a meeting next week.
Okay, thank you. Director, seems like we've exhausted this staff. Is there anything under number 5 that we? Okay, well, I'll open this topic to public comment. Anyone out there? Yes, come forward, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Pappas and Vice Chair Brown, committee members, Dennis Holmes, Associate Superintendent, Campbell County School District. And I always believe in giving credit where credit is due. And Mr. Chair, Trent and Shelley have done an outstanding job managing these grant funds. And I appreciate the comments and perhaps a little skepticism. But I think from our perspective, and I myself and my executive assistant, Sandy Kinnear, manage all of our grant funds, and these are highly scrutinized. And the accountability that we have, and Senator Cost is right, is not only to WDE, but our auditors are audited as well based on our expenditures. So there are multiple checks and balance in place. And the whole process has just been as difficult as it is to submit your grant application and so on and so forth. But the whole process has worked extremely well and has been very beneficial for the district. I also appreciated Senator Hutchins' questions about Chromebooks and some of the other things. And it's really hard to understand the scope of COVID on school districts and how many facets it has impacted learning. Chromebooks, it might be a Chromebook in a classroom. More likely it's a Chromebook at home with the kid who's unable to get to school, because of some type of COVID related situation. But ultimately, and I'd be happy to answer more questions, but ultimately, in my opinion, Trent and Shelley, and now Danielle Netzer, who helps them out, have done an outstanding job with this whole process, as difficult as it has been, time consuming as well. But I can say that a phone call to Trent or Shelley is returned, if not answered, is returned immediately. And to me, that's not only great customer service, but that is just an outstanding working relationship. So much appreciated.
Great, thank you. Questions, committee? Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not really part of the facilities, but it's got me concerned. I noticed there's a number of staff increases with the funds. When those funds run out, what does that become?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cost, great question. And some of the increase with staff is to provide remote learning for those kids who are unable to get to school. When, with every grant, there's a sunrise and a sunset. In September of 2023, when the sun sets, if you have those situations, either a district is going to figure out how to put those costs into the general fund, or inevitably, you're right, they'll go away. So we just hope that the impact of COVID, I think we all wish this no longer exists by September of 2023, so that we don't have those situations where we're forced to make difficult decisions or not be able to provide what's best for kids.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Follow up on
Senator
that.
Brown, or Representative Brown.
Don't do that to me, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of a follow-up on that. And I appreciate your candidness, your candor on this topic. But I agree with the senator that what I'm concerned about is in just a few short years, while it's outside the scope, maybe particular of this committee, but it's in some of the meeting materials here. We may run into this discussion of this is the elimination of X amount of jobs. We can't do that. We can't lose these people. It's a growing concern of mine when we have federal funds and we see these types of expenditures going out for growing areas that we know we don't have funds for. I guess more than a question, just more of a statement that I hope we do have very candid conversations with these employees that we're bringing on and growing, that there is not an expectation. And not only that, maybe with our communities as well, because when we start to have these crunch time discussions on school funding, these are the first things that happen is we get talked to about jobs. And I really get scared about hearing, oh, well, we're eliminating these positions at the schools. It falls back on our shoulders as legislators. And frankly, it puts us in a sticky situation to determine, to discuss with you and with our constituents. This was a local control decision. And this is something that the board decided to do. And now we're being forced to either find a way to hold on to these jobs by increasing government, or, with government spending, or we're losing jobs. And that's just not a fun conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
Senator Pappas, Representative Brown, I absolutely agree. And that's part of the planning. You don't ever want to promise something that you can't deliver on. And some of the positions are temporary and noted ahead of time. And some of the positions may be just an intermittent fix for, that period of time. It's my hope, for example, with some of the extra learning that we provided this last year, is that we don't have to do that because we don't have the restrictions from from COVID and whatnot. But you're exactly right.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, Dennis, thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yep. Further comment? Paige, come forward. Morning.
Sorry. It's been, Mr. Chair, so long since I've seen y'all in person. I forgot I had to have a mic on. Paige Fenton Hughes, I'm the superintendent at Commerce One. And I just want to answer just a couple of questions and clear up something. I was alarmed when I saw my own numbers in this. So I want to explain them a little bit to you. And I think it goes, Vice Chairman Brown, to your comment about, hey, this might not have to do with facilities. These numbers on this chart don't have to do with facilities for my district. So Shelley gave you the exact right numbers about what we've requested for ESSER 1 in that grant application. So she's right on the money, but only a tiny, tiny portion of that, which was a network upgrade, has anything to do with facilities. So all the rest of it was curriculum, professional development, all that kind of thing. So I just don't want you to think that we're going to have $1.275 million worth of facilities, because we're not. And then if you go down to that next section, and let me tell you the exact page so that we're talking about the same thing. We are on page, mine says 5 of 122, but on my PDF scroll, it says 7. And you'll see it says Commerce One Douglas, $2,273,000. And that has a list like Senator Hutchings was referring to with the other district. Then if you go down to what we filled out for the SFC, you'll see a whole different number. So I'm going to be honest with you all. I had no idea what that survey was asking us until today when it got explained to me. So I don't think superintendents are being obstructionist and not answering. I'm going to be honest today and tell you that my business manager and I thought about not answering, because we thought that you would get misleading information. And I actually sent a note to Representative Walters and Senator Landon, because I didn't know you all were switching up your leadership, just to say, hey, we filled out the form because we don't like to be requested for information and not provide it. But I said, I am very afraid you're going to get a lot of misleading information. And it's not going to be, I think, what you want to find out. So I think if you all are going to talk among yourselves about, how we can move forward working together, we would be happy to help you do that. But I don't think school districts, to my knowledge, are outlaying a lot of this money for anything really for facilities. And I don't know everyone's, we don't sit around and talk to each other about everything we're using our money for, but it's certainly not been part of any of our discussions that we've had among ourselves as superintendents. So if you have specific questions about our stuff, I can talk to you about that.
Thank you. One moment, Paige. Thank you for that comment, because I felt the same way, and I expressed this to the director yesterday, that I really felt that, by looking at the responses, that districts didn't have any idea what they were being asked. And so I think there was some confusion and so, maybe, I don't know how accurate any of this stuff is. I take it with a grain of salt right at this point.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I think if I would have known that, that would have been a different number y'all saw. So,
Yeah.
and we're happy to give you the right information. No one's trying to, mislead. So,
Excuse me, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This kind of piggybacks on what you just said. I don't know what the survey was, but it seems to me if someone says, what did you ask for? What did you spend it on? What do you need in the future? I don't know. Maybe Mr. Jerry can tell us what was on the survey so we can kind of get an idea how hard it was to answer. And I must say, thank you for answering. I appreciate that. So if he could kind of give us an idea what the survey requested, because it seems pretty clear to me.
Director?
Thank you. So we were concerned on how we might get answers because we're trying to be proactive to answer an LSO question for select while we're moving through time, while we don't have guidelines. So we're saying, and if something popped up to the top, we were worried about apples, oranges, and cars, and we got apples, oranges, and cars, but we were thinking that if something came up, if something rose to the top, that a lot of the district concerns might be in HVAC, might be in filter. We have an overriding theme, we were hoping to come out of it with, but we also were concerned we get exactly what you were talking about too, what you were mentioning, that some is in the safety area, some is in nutrition, some is for technology and learning from home. And we got what we got, and then we looked at it and thought it'd be irresponsible for us to speak for districts and try to interpret and put that together. So it was put it into the packet. Let's have a discussion, see if this works. If it doesn't, do we need to throw this out and go back with more specific, then we would do so. We're all trying to respond in a timely manner to something that we haven't had the question answered for us yet. And I was hoping a theme might rise to the top, a couple of them that we could talk about, but we got what I was suspecting we were going to get. And then I was actually going to bring up a point earlier, and I'm glad you did too. I was going to say to your question, Senator Hutchings, I wouldn't hold it against the 23 responses out of 48. I'm thinking that there were districts who either didn't know how to answer this, or our smaller ones didn't even have staff to broach this subject yet and figure it out. And they didn't want to give misleading information. So, we were concerned about the ask because it wasn't clear in the ask, but we were hoping some themes might come out of it. And we did get a fair amount. They were worried about the overall HVAC system and things of that nature, but we also got a whole lot of other things too. And we're looking at it as well and saying, I'm not sure what this is all going to tell us on select day. And then here we are.
Thank you, Director. Paige, you want to continue?
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of other things. I just want to echo what Dennis said about the oversight. I think the department's been great. I can't even imagine how they have managed it, to be honest. It's a crazy amount of workload for them. And they've tried to help us make sure that we are inside allowable expenses. They've been great about responding to any of our requests. And I think Dennis and Senator Cost said it well. I mean, we will be held accountable by an audit from the WDE, and they'll be audited. So none of us, we don't want to pay it back. So trust us in being very careful in how we're outlaying those funds. And then just to follow up on Senator Hutchings' concerns, I'm a little bit concerned. I got an email from one of my own representatives the other day who said something to me like, well, it'll kind of depend on how you all spend the money. And so I'm looking at this list of things, and if I were Senator Hutchings, I'd be saying exactly what she said to us. Like, if you see a list of this, you're gonna be like, Paige, really? What are you doing out there? So I think we need to have more talks and less lists, because I don't think you can tell by looking at this why we would request anything. And I know we can't, I can't call Troy every day and have a chat about why I do call him sometimes and have a chat about weird things, but I can't do it all the time and take up all our time having a chat. But I'll just give you an example from my district about a food service thing. And you two know from going through my buildings, but we had 2 schools who ate in the same lunchroom because they're across a foyer from each other. Okay, once we have COVID, they can't eat in the same lunchroom. And so we did have some weird, it would look, I think, to Senator Hutchings, very weird because we had to put in a compartmentalized sink. We had to put in a different dishwasher to meet code because we had to split our kids into 2 lunchrooms. So you're going to see weird things like that. And unless you know why we had to do it, I have no idea why the person requested bleachers, but my first thought was we have bleachers in our lunchroom. And if we had to spread those kids out to eat lunch, you might need some more bleachers. I have no idea. I'm not answering for them. But I think you're going to see things and you're going to think, oh my goodness, why would they request such strange things? And probably the only way for you to know is just to follow up with us, because we have to provide a narrative, but I don't think Shelley and Trent can provide you all our narratives, or you guys would have nothing else to do but read that. So anyway.
Questions, Senator Landon?
Not really a question, Mr. Chairman, but Superintendent Hughes, I just wanted to thank you. I know the time of year and how difficult it is to be gone from your district today. I think this is the last day or maybe the second to last day of school, and same way to Dennis. I appreciate you guys being here. This is a weird time, and going forward, we're really counting on you guys to help us navigate this thing. I just wanted to assure all of our districts out there that our interest, I think I speak for the select committee, our interest is in stretching these dollars as far as we can make them go. And, rather than our districts doing a lot of things over here, and then we try to roll in and supplement when we don't know what to supplement, that's the issue. And I think if we team up and work carefully together, we can stretch this thing and really do a lot of people a lot of good. I hope that makes sense, Superintendent.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair and Senator Landon, I think we all agree about that. I think superintendents agree. I think I can speak for all my team in that, because we've had a lot of talks about that. People want to leverage the funds the best we can. And just like Shelley shared with you, it's hard for us to know what to do with those ARP funds yet, because we don't really know what that's going to look like. And I'll be honest with you, as I always am, I don't know what you're going to do with what I think is my money. Do you see what I'm saying? So I said to my business manager, let's think about using 20% of those ARP funds, because I think that hasn't been on the table. But that other 80%, we haven't talked about using that at all, because I'm scared to, and I'm scared to leverage that against my general fund. And Representative Brown, your comments, and I think Dennis sort of addressed this appropriately. It's different for everyone. So you'll see what you see in front of you here from my district. We requested some professional service contracts because we're having a hard time keeping up with tech, and I don't want to hire someone because I won't have any money for them in a few years. But if that were an elementary teacher, I might hire them because we'll have turnover there where I could absorb. So you might see things like that and you'll be like, oh, Paige, you hired, I didn't, but say I did hire 5 elementary teachers, you might be going, oh, that seems not smart. I could suck them up into my general fund. That would happen. 2 or 3 tech guys, probably not. So that's why we're doing them on a contract. So I think Senator Landon's point is well taken. I think we're being as careful as we can to leverage those funds the best way we can. And also, and I'm going to be honest about this, there are some supplemental things because, and Senator Hutchings noticed this in that request, like our summer school numbers, you guys, are way up. So, and I want them to be way up because we want to see if we can accelerate our kids and not have that regression. So there will be additional funds that we normally wouldn't have outlaid in that way if it weren't for COVID. So it's complicated.
Representative Brown.
Paige, it's good to see you.
Oh, I'm so glad to see you guys. Thanks.
I think, I appreciate what you just had to say there, because I don't think there's anybody up on this dais that actually believes there's nefarious actions whatsoever occurring. I think what we have is cautious skepticism. And I think that it's important to note that that's our job. I mean, we have a fiduciary responsibility, as the good senator just said, to make sure that these dollars are stretched as far as possible. And all we're doing is just making sure that when we go back to talk to our constituents, or our school board for that matter, that we're lined out just as well as you guys are. And it is difficult. You guys deal with this day in, day out, and this is your bread and butter. This is like, you know, a crouton on top of the salad for us. We've got so many other things going on that when we ask these questions and we dive deep into this and we ask these or say these difficult statements, it's not necessarily condemning or anything along those lines. It's just expressing our cautious skepticism. So that being said, I wholeheartedly agree with the good senator from here that we can't thank you guys enough for what you guys did this past year. If I'm not mistaken, I think we're the only state that had our schools open all year round. And that's commendable beyond words. And that's because of your guys' leadership. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank you for clarifying a lot of what's on the list. It really helped me a lot, both of you guys, for coming down. Just thanks.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate it. And I'll wrap up, but I think we appreciate the questions, because those are questions we need to be able to answer. We need to answer them to you all, but to our own constituents. And our boards ask us a lot of questions, and that's good, because that kind of, helps us think through things. We treat our board like a thinking partner. I think we treat you guys that way. I know Senator Lannon's like, yeah, I get a few emails about things, but it helps all of us to do better when we talk about stuff. So appreciate each of you. And I know Representative Brown said, Paige, I never hear from you anymore. And I said, I see you every day. I'm on Zoom every day. I'm on YouTube, but you didn't see us. So thanks for your work, and let us know what you need from us to get accurate information, and we'll help you. So
Committee, any other questions? Yeah, Senator Rothfuss.
I will say one thing, and it is very nice to see you in person, Paige. It's been a couple of years, or however long it's been. I do think that we have to be thoughtful that we don't get overly bogged down in the bureaucracy of managing where the funds went and how they were spent. When you're in a crisis, you don't need to prolong the crisis just by continuous review and reflection. I think we need to be focused on moving forward as opposed to focused on the past. I think we all see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is, a nice open fall, which we're all looking forward to. But I think the thing that then benefits the mission, which is education, right? The mission is not our budget. The mission is education. It is the question that I would invite everyone to answer, which is, what did we learn that we can all share and we can do better with? If you've got those things, I want to hear about those things. I actually don't need to hear, in the weeds, how many Chromebooks you bought. I get why you bought that, and I get why you had hard decisions, and I get why I'll never get all of the things you bought, because I don't need to know that. But as a policymaker, if we learn something, and if we can help you do a better job because of what you learned, I think it's really good for us to hear that and have that conversation. So we're being forward-looking, proactive, and making our education system in the state better for what we do have in resources. And that's where I think we can partner with you. So that would be my one ask for everyone, is as we finally pull out of this, the reflection I hope we do isn't on whether we dotted our I's and crossed our T's in all the forms, but what we can learn and take forward. So there's my question for you. And we don't necessarily have to have those answers now, but if you have any comments, I'd welcome them.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I don't have a good answer, but I'm going to tell you how I think I might have a good answer in a couple months. So one of the things that's allowable, and Shelley can probably talk to you better about this, but is looking at our data and seeing where we think our students might either have a gap or there might be a blip or something happen, and we're trying to figure that out. And so we have to do that as part of our school-wide Title I application and stuff as well for Shelley's team at the department. So we've been working on that. So one of the things I said to my principals was, we may get these ARP funds, and we have some leeway in how we can spend those to address these kinds of learning gaps or loss. So I invited them to do exactly what you said. So I said, it will be a tragedy beyond the tragedy we've been through if all of a sudden every school in Converse One looks like March of 2020. That would be a travesty. So I said to them, here's some parameters, and I gave them some. Please come to me with your proposal for your school about how to utilize funds to address these learning issues moving forward in an innovative way and leveraging all this technology we bought. So if we bought every kid a Chromebook and all we're going to do is word process, that is going to be not the best use of our funds. So I'm getting those now. And so what I got was a proposal for some learning spaces, which I don't think anything I've gotten would fall under anything you all would deal with. These are small kinds of things, but and then it would say what the proposal was, and then underneath it, the research base and the effect size of that intervention. It was pretty impressive. So I'll get back to you, Senator Rothfuss and committee, with the answer to that. And Dennis and I will share that with our colleagues and get you some really good, it'll be, anecdotal information, and there might be some hard data. I won't have it yet, but some might. So we're on it. Thank you, guys.
Committee, further questions? Thank you, Paige.
Yep, thank you.
Any other further public comment? Please come forward.
Ted May, Fremont County School District 25, Riverton, Wyoming. I'm the Buildings and Grounds Supervisor. So as far as the facility side, one of the issues that right at the beginning of COVID was we had issues of where do we go? What was the money going to be allowed to use for? And we just didn't have any direction. So that I think, and as far as your questions about answering the survey, I think that's one of the issues. We just didn't know what the money is intended for as far as facility side. When we're being told air filtration, that covers a very broad spectrum. So we wanted to be very careful on where we're spending that money. And when it comes to air filtration, some of the money we did spend as far as facilities was we did kiosk temperatures controls as students and staff members came into buildings. So we had to add electrical outlets, data drops for those particular pieces of equipment. So that's pretty much what we spent some of that money early on, so we could open the schools back up and have those temperature gauges. Air filtration, we're still a little leery of spending money on, when we have a lot of different systems in a lot of different buildings. So we're very leery of spending that money. And what is that going to be to affect our major maintenance money down the road or anything like that? So any direction that we can get would be very, very helpful. So any questions?
Questions, committee?
Just a quick one.
Yeah. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ted, I'm just curious, do you think, and Paige kind of touched on this, do you think most of our districts will do a facilities review along with all of that curricular and ADM stuff and all of the classroom stuff? Just from a physical standpoint, did we learn some things through this last year and a half that will eventually arrive on this desk with select school facilities?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
So is there anything from a school facility standpoint, just facilities that we learned or that we need to be aware of, that we need to fix, that we need to modify? I'm just curious, did you run into those sorts of things? And maybe we solved it with bleachers and things. I don't.
I looked at it as when I'm being told that we can use the money for air filtration, it is a very broad term. And there are things that we would like to use them on. I mean, when it comes to certain buildings, yes, can I change out an HVAC system? I don't know that answer, and I don't want to go change that without the direction of saying, yes, you would be covered for major maintenance down the road if we changed out a unit like that. We are looking at ionization. There's the light filters, where you could try to help your air filtration, and then ionization. That was one of the issues. We went up to the college at CWC. That's one of the systems they went. It's on the supply side. You add it to the supply side of a HVAC system, and that seemed to be the best option for us. And we still have not moved forward on that because we're still a little leery of doing anything like that.
Yeah, that's helpful, Ted. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayne?
Yes.
I'm just a little concerned why you're so leery. If it sounds like you guys are doing what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to use it for the HVAC. And if that's what you're supposed to use it for, you asked for it, you got it, go for it. Where's the leeriness coming in?
The leeriness comes to, let's just take our aquatic center. Yes, we need air handlers changed there. It's an enhancement. Is that gonna cause a problem if we move forward changing those air handlers out in our aquatic center, and then and see if that would be allowable under under state regulations?
Gotcha. Mr. Chairman, follow up to Mr. Jerry. You're bouncing your head, so maybe he could tell you something over there. I don't know.
No, I'm in agreement with you.
Okay.
There are what we all perceive to be a classroom, a teaching space, than what is not a classroom teaching space. And the districts will tell you all day long, a gymnasium is a teaching space and aquatics is a teaching space, right?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so when you look at the red book and you look at the guidelines and things, if we go out into this perceived teaching space and spend that money and someone else says maybe not so much, then it's that general fund obligation debt that cost people their jobs. And so that I think that would be your leering. I don't want to speak for you, but I've been in your shoes. So I think I know what you're saying.
That would be correct. We go out and do something like that, and then it comes back and say, no, that wouldn't be a teaching space. And then it comes onto the general fund. And then, like I said, I might not have a job. So
Really quick follow-up, because now you have that knowledge from Hughes and Holmes about, or even Mrs. Hamill, when she said they really can't say no to you. So once you do that, it seems like you're gonna be okay, because they're not gonna say no.
I understand they're not going to say no, but if I go change something out, I would also want to make sure that the state facilities is in agreement of what I'm trying to do here, as far as our facility.
Mr. Chairman, can you go to Hamill and ask her if what you're doing is okay, so you can do it? I'm asking.
She would need to go.
Do you have the authority to go to the WD and
Well,
say,
I
we
would,
want to?
in concert with our business manager, and, yeah, and somebody doing the grant, I would imagine that would, but I just don't want to I don't want to step outside the box and then all of a sudden they come back at our general fund and say, we just spent $500,000 on changing air handlers, and then it comes back to us on, as far as the general fund issue.
Director Vincent, did you have a?
Yeah, I'll attempt to speak for you and with you again.
Yes.
So sometimes the other concern is that when it is major maintenance work, we have our state rules on how that's going to be done. But we keep kind of mixing the conversation here in order to make the most of our money with federal guidelines. And I've done a lot of federal work, I'm sorry to say. And a lot of times it's ready, fire, aim. So today there's a money that's released and he starts spending, and later they tell you what the audits of that money is going to be after you're down the road, and you find that out later. So I was always nervous when I got federal money, and it was a concern to me.
Good for you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further, Representative Brown?
I just want to say thank you, actually. Not in any accusatory way whatsoever. I want to thank you for being skeptical and for being cautious with what you're doing, because I think that's the type of responsibility and accountability that we're looking for, at least with this committee, that you're not just going out, oh, we got money to blow, let's go do it. I truly do appreciate your willingness to step back for a second and look at what happens downwind of those actions. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Brings us to the end of the subject. Staff, did you have any closing thoughts on this topic?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think we have our marching orders with regards to setting up a meeting and continuing work on this subject.
Okay, well, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I would just throw this out for a little bit more discussion on this topic. And I've wondered about it as we led up these days to this meeting, but do we have an interest do we want to suggest a bill draft that might be considered if we do have a special session? And that bill would be a proposal for the use of some of these funds that are available. And I just thought we might want to have that conversation. If we were to go after some monies that could be used on our school facilities, what would that look like? Communication funds are allowable, some HVAC money's allowable. I just throw that out there. Is it your pleasure that we bring anything forward?
Senator Landon, I mean, I would love to do that. The problem I see is, as we've heard, we're not going to know those directions till the end of the summer. We won't know what to put in a bill. So to bring one to a special session, if it happens here in July, I think is just way too soon. Probably we could do something for the session next year. By the end of the summer, I think guidance on those two very short sentences in there will probably come to fruition. And maybe the director could give us some thoughts on that, but I just don't think we know yet what we can use those funds for. They're just too broad.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Representative Brown.
we also run into the risk of, if we decide to draft a bill or whatever the case may be, we go into special session and then we have something on the books that restricts further than what the federal guidance allows, then we run ourselves risk afoul of not having the capability of using the funds correctly. So while I think it's prudent for us to have something in the back of our minds and continue the discussion, as much as I was gearing up and ready for something along those lines today, after having some discussions today and even late last night, I think we are a little premature in drafting a bill, at least in my opinion.
And not only could it restrict things beyond, more stringent than the feds, but we may also put something in there that allows something that the feds won't allow when we find out towards the end of the summer. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Senator.
Just as a follow-up, I appreciate the thoughts of our chairman and vice chairman. I just didn't want to get to July and not have an oar in the water. I know there's going to be a lot of oars out of that boat, and we're going to be considering a lot of different things for the use of those funds. I just didn't want to miss any opportunities that we could use, for example, to tackle that component list that we know exists and it's out there. But I appreciate your thoughts too. I mean, I get it. It's a tough lift.
I'd like to ask the director if his thoughts on my thoughts.
So I I don't know anything about legislature and laws, and that's what you all do. So if you think you have some components to put a framework together or not, you see what our attempt was, right? To ask a survey and get results on something that we don't have details for yet. And it turned out to be apples, oranges, and cars. So what I really appreciate about this conversation with the school districts, I was very nervous about this whole section of COVID. And I went back and tried to lay it all out so it made sense to me, and it wasn't. And I'm saying, is this new guy that this isn't making sense to you? And I look back at it and we're trying to give information in a timely manner that says certain things while we don't know what the guideline is. And I was nervous about it. I'm looking forward to your suggestion, Mr. Chair, that we get with WDE and set something up on how we're going to communicate and how we're going to work with the districts. Because I looked at our department and said, we have a WDE process and that train's been going. We have local control and they're not even sure what all they want to do yet because we don't have the guidelines. And I'm sure that we're going to end up being airlifted in the center and play some role in there. And I was confused and concerned about that. So I like us getting together and starting to lay that out on what our roles and responsibilities are going to be, to working with WDE, to listening to the districts so we can update you. So I'm longer I sit here today, I'm more looking forward to that meeting next week. So we can start to roll something out that's definitive.
I really do. I really do think that we are, as Representative Brown said, we are premature in this. As much as I'd like to see something, we're going to be looking to you and to the WDE for content to go into the bill based on the guidelines from the feds. And they're so broad right now, and we don't understand them, that what we do will probably be wrong if we do it in July. So Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I appreciate this conversation, and I don't think we want to do anything that micromanages the funding at the district level, because the way that the federal laws are structured provides that opportunity, and then subject to approval of WDE. So we have that process in place. What we don't have, getting at good Senator Landon's point, is something that would authorize the state to take action subject to the availability of funds, which, if we wanted to, a potential prudent path or something to have in our pocket for July would simply to be our school CapCon bill with a appropriation section, which is subject to availability of federal funds as appropriated through CARES, ARP, et cetera. You can go down spending up to this amount of money on these component projects, these capital construction projects, et cetera. So it would be a mini school CapCon bill from the state's perspective, having nothing to do with what the school districts do with their money. That would be potentially appropriate for us. And again, we don't have to do that. But if we were to do something, I think that's what's in our scope. We don't have that. At the same time, it's not to say that couldn't go into some budget bill or something else. We've done it before. We can do it again. So it's not a Herculean effort for us to get that done, whether we have the bill or not. But if we wanted it to be thoughtfully considered in time for preparation, that could be an action that this committee could take. And I just open that for discussion. I don't necessarily care one way or another on it, but I think if we were to take an action, that'd be the one.
Representative Brown.
I appreciate the good senator's comments there. My only pause for concern on that is we're talking about the school district's money that's flowing through the Department of Education. We're not talking about the money that we're going to be getting as a state at a state level. So I think we're talking about two different opportunities, in my opinion. We've really been discussing what the school districts are going to be using and how we're going to make sure that we can stretch those as far as possible. The state doesn't have any control over those.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to be clear, I am not talking about the funds going to the school district. The state is going to get a tremendous amount of funding that we will have the ability to appropriate in various ways. It will probably not be off limits for those to be appropriated towards education buildings through the school capital construction account. Probably. I don't know. But again, that's the subject to availability. I do not in any way mean put strings on the ESSER funding, whether that's 1, 2, or 3. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I am saying the state's share of the appropriations having the ability, and remember, with our previous CARES Acts, the governor's flex authority was allowed to direct funding to programs that were already authorized. And that would again be the case with ARP Act funding. The challenge is where you have a project that isn't necessarily authorized, and whether our legislation would provide for clear authorization, for example, for component funding, where we have an expectation that that list would be provided through this committee and then go to appropriations for consideration. So to the good Vice Chairman's point, no, these are getting back to the apples and oranges concept, right? I'm talking the apples and the districts are the oranges. So not to overlap. There may be $0 total available at the end of the day for what we would lay out. But yeah, exactly.
Senator Lang.
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the senator outlining the way we might want to go about something. That authorization piece is pretty critical if we're going to leverage any of those funds, because without that, we're not going to be able to target anything. So the way that would work, or potentially could work, Mr. Chairman, is that we could request that staff draw something up based on some of the comments of the good senator. And at the end of the month, 26th, 27th of June, somewhere in there, we have a quick Zoom meeting and we decide as a committee whether we want that piece to go forward or not. Assuming that there is going to be a special session, that at least gets a placeholder in the hopper so that school facilities might be considered. And several of those component projects, just as a reminder, they involve HVAC. We've got school security projects that are laying out there, and communication projects that certainly qualify under this funding, but they wouldn't be authorized unless we do that. So thank you.
So do I hear a motion from Rothras and a second from Landon?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion to draft a short form school CapCon bill subject to appropriation to the state. And again, to identify and work with the commission department on identifying those projects that would make sense, where we would want authorization this year because they're shovel ready, ready to start kind of things, and component funding and some of our other projects that could go out the door. I'd remind the committee, we don't need to go beyond that because these funds are live for a few years, unlike that first round of CARES Act funding where we had to spend them quickly. So we wouldn't have to spend these quickly. But if there are projects that are ready to go where we would want to get them started in July, if we had the authorization, then let's figure out what that list is. And the other thing we can do is also just have a line there for major maintenance, so that as long as there's a major maintenance budget, we could take that into a special session and contemplate, well, maybe we just want it to go to major maintenance or something along those lines. So major maintenance components and any immediate projects, get them queued up subject to available appropriation of federal funds. Okay, that's my motion.
Any other questions on the motion? I got a second. Yeah, you already.
That was my Zoom second.
That's your Zoom second. Okay, any committee, any further comments before we take a vote? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we'll ask staff to do that for us as well. Okay, any further comments before we break for lunch? I apologize, we never did take a morning break, but now we get an hour and a half for lunch. So staff, any other comments before we break for lunch? Okay, so we'll be back at 1 p.m. Thank you.